Hey everyone, in this video we're going to talk about Toulmin's argumentative structure, what it is, how it works, and how you can use it in your research essay. So by the end of this essay, you should be able to define the elements of Toulmin's argumentative structure. You should be able to apply these to your own reading of academic sources because they use it a lot. And you should be able to apply this to your own writing. So not only should you be able to use this to read articles, you should be able to reconstruct it in your own writing as well. And why? Because low-key, you will see this as you start applying it. Everyone uses it. It's used a lot in argumentative writing. And that makes sense because he created this by, looking at actual argumentative, papers, but also how people construct arguments in their day-to-day life. This is his general principle. This is just how we make arguments that are strong. So let's jump into it. You want to start with a claim. Well, you don't really want to start with a claim. You want to end up here, but we'll start with this. But basically what you want to do is you want to start thinking about what are you trying to prove? What are you trying to prove is true? What are you trying to prove is valuable? What are you trying to prove we should or should not do? Claim, value, fact. Claims of value, fact, policy, my bad. Then you want to go back to your data. And in the real world, when you're really starting, not right now, data is going to be your starting point. Really, your starting point will be a question. But here's all the data I have about my question. Here's everything I know. But then what you want to do is okay, how does this data support my claim? What is this data saying? How is it saying it? Why is it saying what it's saying? And how does all of that help me make the argument that I'm trying to make? So again, whereas your data is sort of what you're talking about, your examples, your primary sources, your warrants are really going to be the rationale, how does that work? Why does that work? Who supports those ideas? Because your rationale is where you bring in a lot of your secondary, your warrants, you could also call it your rationale, or where you're going to bring in a lot of your secondary sources, your other experts, people who agree with you, other studies that have been done, things that back up, the things that you are saying about your data. So again, data is usually primary source stuff, backing is usually secondary stuff, warrants are explaining how your data supports your claim. Now, in that, you're going to need qualifiers. You're going to have to tell me what the limits of your data are, what its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, what its limitations are, under what condition it is true, under what conditions it's not true, anything that might, qualify it. And then if there are any rebuttals, again, other secondary sources that might say, I don't agree with this, or I would argue this a different way. People who maybe see another side of it, maybe who, prioritize another theory or another way of explaining it, that, is equally valid and respected. You don't need to include rebuttals just to include rebuttals. You should do them when they're serious. So if you're going to say that, reading is best taught through vocabulary, you might argue, but other people argue that it's best taught through vocabulary or through grammar. Here's why they're not right. And I am. So again, you have to think about those rebuttals as being actual conversations that you're engaging with. But this is generally the model. You start with your data, and then you move to your qualifiers, to your claims. But in that process, you have to make sure that you have your warrants. You explain how your data proves your claim, because otherwise I don't care. And then you need to have backup evidence for these things. Then you have to qualify any of that data, and you have to include your rebuttals. Otherwise, I'm just going to say hey, what about that other person who doesn't agree with you? Why aren't they right? Make sense? Here's my thing. Write this down. Memorize this. So let's go into it. Claim is basically this. What is this paragraph trying to prove about your topic? Claim is just really answering that question. You're connecting it to your thesis. You're trying to make sure it's one of those three claims, a claim of value, a claim of fact, a claim of policy, or a combination thereof. And you want it to be arguable. What do I mean? It means you need to be able to have data. If it's not arguable, you can't prove that it's true. So what illustrates that your claim is accurate, that it is what you say it is? And you need to ask yourself, how much data do you need? Look at your topic sentences. What do they say? You need to make sure that your data fully illustrates every element of that claim in that paragraph. It needs to be clear. It needs to be concrete. It needs to be specific primary source examples, because primary source samples or examples are going to be your strongest ones. But again, it needs to illustrate the claim. It needs to be a clear, concrete, real-world example, and preferably it is coming from a primary source. Then we can go into our warrants, where these are explaining how or why does your evidence prove your claim. And what do you think? Why do you think what you think about your evidence? So this is really where you're analyzing your evidence. You're evaluating it. You're breaking it down. You're explaining what's good, what's bad, and you're interpreting it. You're explaining to me what it means. This is going to be the vast majority of your writing. This is going to be the biggest part of your paragraph. So this is sort of the most important because it's really your brain on a page. From this, you might need backing. You might need what other research backs up your warrant. And this is really important for research writing. Who supports what you are saying? So we want scholarship by experts. This is the gold standard. This is the best. You could bring in other secondary sources that maybe aren't scholarly, maybe like a journalist who was there and wrote about the story. Maybe you could do like, I was going to say an encyclopedia, but don't do an encyclopedia. But yeah, just other secondary sources, even if they aren't by experts. Or, even if it's not peer-reviewed scholarship, I guess I should say. And again, you want multiple here. It's going back to your sort of literature review. The more you can synthesize this, the more you can show where there is agreement or where there's disagreement, you will be stronger there. We need qualifiers. Not every paragraph will have them. But again, what are the limitations to your data or your claims? What can you not say? What should I not assume is true? And so you're going to use, hedging language. This may be true if this is true. Things like that. That just maybe sound a little less certain than like, this always happens. This almost always happens. It's stuff like that. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to hedge everything, but like where you're not sure, you should use hedging language. You want to make sure that you're showing the actual strengths of your argument and you're acknowledging the actual weaknesses of it. If something's not fully understood or you can't prove something, you need to tell me that. It doesn't make you look weak. It doesn't make you look dumb. It makes you look honest and reliable. And that's maybe the most important thing here is just like, you just have to tell people the truth. If you lie and you make things seem bigger or more important than they are, no one's going to trust you. So again, be honest. And then you can bring in rebuttals. Are there alternative points of view? Are there people who don't agree with you? If so, where is it? Why is it? What do they say? So again, be honest. Who agrees with you? Who doesn't agree with you? Not everyone's going to agree with you, and that's cool. There might be a lot of people who don't agree with you. There might be a lot of people who don't agree with you. And this is going to be especially true for rebuttals. There might not be a whole lot of people who disagree with you. So again, don't think you have to have one just for having it. And again, this can also be a new paragraph. Don't feel like you have to like shoehorn this into the same paragraph. Rebuttals often work better as a separate paragraph, TBH. So again, this is what it will look like. It's not always perfect. It's not always completely representative of everything, but this is pretty typical to what you're going to find. Okay, so this will sort of be close to it, but usually your claim could also be a thesis. Your data, this is going to be like a finding of results. This could be a discussion. This might be what you call your lit review. This might be your methods, and this might be this might show up in your discussion methods or lit review. But like as you're looking at academic articles that are structured this way, this is kind of maybe where you can find these elements. Again, not a perfect match, not always totally accurate. That's close. Okay, 5 takeaways. What are they? 1, this contains 6 elements. These elements can work at the essay section or paragraph level. They are the claim, evidence, and warrants are always required. You're going to need those in basically every single paragraph that you have in research-based writing. Backing, rebuttal, and qualifiers are probably going to be there, but probably not in every single paragraph. I'm not going to do those all the time, but a lot of the time. And then again, this is used in all kinds of argumentative writing, not just academic writing as well. Okay, if you have any questions on this, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, because you're going to need to demonstrate that you can do this, especially at the paragraph level for your final research paper. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out at cable@elgin.edu, and I will see you in the next video.